Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. And today we are talking about one of the great masters of cinema, Alfred Hitchcock. We're discussing his 1948 film, Rope, because, folks, if we're going to talk about Hitchcock, we're going to talk about the gay one. So,
Yes.
Megan,
The
this is
gay obscure one.
yes, exactly. We'll
Mhm.
hopefully get to other of his films first, but this is where we're going to start. So, Megan, I think we both had kind of pretty different awarenesses and experiences with Hitchcock coming into this episode. Why don't you start with what your awareness and experience with Hitchcock was?
Yes. So as with many of our movies that we see here on Film Optimist, Seth is a bit of more of the master than I am at least the directors or the more iconic figures that we tend to talk about, which is embarrassing as a film, film any kind of film person gets a little bit of Hitchcock education in their education if they do choose to study film. I certainly got that. I got the bare bones minimum of like what a classic Hitchcock is and what it looks like. And certainly this film showcased some of that. This is actually one of my, I've seen, The Birds, and that's almost about it. But and then a little bit of Psycho, obviously, like I think everybody's seen a little bit of Psycho at this point.
Yes.
But yeah, and I think that what I had noticed is I know of what Hitchcock's style is, even without having like only seeing those two movies, basically. And I think that's just a testament to how like iconic his style is, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on in this movie because it was certainly prevalent in this movie. But I just was like shocked by how many Hitchcock, I would say, isms I had seen in movies and was able to, you immediately identify it as being Hitchcock-esque in a sort of way. So that's kind of my take on it. If I'm sure that if there are any like people in my boat, they kind of get the same gist. But Seth, if you want to talk to us about your
Sure. Yeah,
much
absolutely.
more well-versed understanding of Hitchcock.
I so I had already seen a good amount of Hitchcock. Megan and I went to the same school, and my wife went to the same school years earlier, where they used to offer a Hitchcock class.
That's right.
Unfortunately, they did not offer it, I think, while you and I were there, Megan. But so when I started dating my wife, she was going through this and not just watching the movies, but really studying it academically and watching a lot of the less popular ones because Hitchcock had a very long career. He started in the silent era in the 20s, and his last movie came
Yes.
out in the 70s. So we're talking a 50-year career here. And it's weird because commercially and arguably artistically, his peak is in the 50s. That's
Mhm.
not to say there aren't good stuff throughout there. Some of his later stuff is still good. Some of his early stuff is oddly good. But yeah, he also made it about 50 movies, little over there. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to get an accurate estimate because it's hard to see which movies are lost or not. Some of those early silent films.
Mhm.
So I've seen quite a few of his movies. I grew up watching his movies, and we had a film club with folks for a while where we were trying to watch every Hitchcock movie, and that fell apart. But we made it through about 20 as a group, and that
That's
was
pretty good.
which is good considering it took a while to get there. There was a couple double movie nights or
Oh,
double
double
features.
features.
Yeah, double movie nights. Jesus, there was some double features. But yeah, he certainly is someone that I think people should watch his movies, but
Mhm.
you're seeing his techniques whether you realize it or not.
That's
And
right.
personally, because he was so prolific and so influential, one could also be forgiven for not realizing they're watching someone who's inspired by them. Might not even the director they're watching might not even realize that. Like I think most modern suspense movies, most suspense scenes in a horror film, even like a bad one, whether known or not, they're borrowing from Hitchcock or they're influenced
That's right.
from most prominently Psycho. Like you can call Psycho the first slasher, or at least a proto slasher, but it
Sure.
goes much larger than that. He also is someone who, before auteur theory was more acknowledged, auteur theory being the theory that the director is really the owner of the movie, which is a thing I think
Mm.
a lot of people agree with now. And I personally do. And if you're into film, you're probably like us, you're excited when a director's name is coming out rather than just a movie or an actor. And
Yeah.
he was one of the first case studies for this, partially because he really made himself a household name. He had his TV show
Mhm.
as well. He always had Alfred Hitchcock Presents on his film posters. He's a cameo in every movie. his trailers were often him talking to the audience. You know, he really made himself
Mhm.
a icon in a way that was unprecedented for a filmmaker at the time. And
That's fun. That reminds me of like a dark like Walt Disney of the time, if you will,
yes,
because
yeah, no,
Disney was doing the same things, but with like children's movies
yeah,
and
I think he
explaining
totally had Walt
Disneyland.
Disney in mind when he was doing this, because he
Uh,
had his trailer for the birds is him talking to the camera and he's about to eat a chicken
exactly.
and feels kind of weird about it. And his trailer for Psycho is walking through the set saying he wouldn't believe how much blood there was there. And
Yeah,
he
yeah.
really played up his ghoulish humor
Yeah.
with his
Hmm.
presence. And you know, you saw him on TV once a week with this show for like 10
That's
years.
right.
So
Yeah.
even like Spielberg doesn't have that. You know, someone
Yeah.
who's a very, people who are, we know a lot about, like, to go to David Lynch or Quentin Tarantino again, like we know a lot about
Hmm.
these people's personalities. They're
Mm.
not that private. They are, but they are in interviews and they have strong personalities, but they're not branding themselves in the same way that
Yes.
Hitchcock did. So,
Hmm.
but he wasn't just a commercial director, he was also quite a good filmmaker who was
Yeah, exactly.
really heavily involved in every aspect of his films. He rarely wrote a movie, but he was also involved in the writing process from the beginning.
Sure. Hmm.
So we've talked, he's called the master of suspense. And one of the reasons is he just understood it better than I think anybody did prior and sometimes still later. And in his interviews, he notes a difference between suspense and shock, and suspense is better
Yes.
as far as he's concerned. And he encapsulates this idea with something he called his bomb theory. And Megan, I think you studied this in school as well. Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, there's a really great, also Seth directed me to this, a video essay about this that we will link. We can also link this in the description for
Mm-hmm.
people to see, because it certainly helped me out, just helped explain it so well. But basically Hitchcock says that he uses two examples of like a bomb going off in a movie, but the latter will be the way that he would present it, basically. So in the first case, you're just watching a scene, somebody's you're talking for 5 minutes or something like that, and then suddenly, shockingly, a bomb goes off and the audience is left with that shock feeling that a lot of like horror movies go to nowadays. It was
A jump
like
scare, basically.
jump scares, yeah, quick, loud, and just boisterous horror or scares that leaves you with that like jump feeling in your stomach, I guess. But that's about it, and it dissipates kind of quickly after that. um the next example would be with the way that he would like um the way that Hitchcock would present it, basically, as you know there's a bomb in the beginning, the audience gets shown and it's going to go off in 5 minutes, and then you are led through the scene knowing that as the audience member, anticipating, waiting, in suspense, as you will, that the bomb goes
Right.
off. And so that's just like his example, a quick good visual example, and like ideation of the difference of these types of effects of suspense. And he argues that the latter is better. He really puts agency, I guess, or in the audience, in terms of they need to know beforehand in order to create suspense. Like that is actually a pretty big criteria for him in terms of like what suspense is. So that was a really helpful way to think about it, I guess,
Yeah.
and an effective way to just to think about the difference of like what we're seeing, basically, and how one little move could just changes everything.
Right. And I think we see this concept all the time. And as Hitchcock's explained this in an interview, he talks about like now the audience is yelling, get out of there. And that's the
Yeah.
film, that's the horror film cliche, is the audience yelling, don't go in there, get out of there. And he was wanting to create that. And he's right. It is more powerful than the shock, and it can last it lasts longer, was largely what he was
Right.
looking at. He keeps coming back to that in interviews. It's like suspense lasts longer than shock, and I want suspense.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the movie we're talking about today is maybe one of the lesser known, but I think it's fantastic, films, Rope, that is fascinating in a lot of ways behind the scenes and technically, but is maybe, in my opinion, the greatest example of bomb theory that he did, because
Mm.
this movie all takes place in one set. It all takes
Hmm.
place in real time. And we'll get in that in a second. And it all takes place with the bomb kind of there. It begins with two
Yes.
characters murdering another man, and they decide to they've already planned, rather, to have a party with acquaintances, including his fiance and parents, and an old school friend are coming over for dinner, which is ghoulish and part of the morbid idea here. And initially they're going to leave him in a trunk in another room, and they I should say Brandon, with the more diabolical of the two. Um,
The leader.
the leader, yes, decides, no, let's serve dinner on this trunk we put him in. Now it's a sacrificial altar. So you have everybody is in a room with the murder victim the entire movie, and so that's the bomb that we, the audience, sees, and of course no one except these two characters knows that it's there. And this is an 80-minute movie where we're waiting for that bomb to go off. We're waiting for, is anybody going to put together what's happening? If so, how? We kind of expect, this is a movie made in 48, we're not expecting these characters to get away with this, but how are they going to get caught? And I don't think you watch, not that this is a very popular show now, but Columbo, the TV show with Peter Falk, was famous.
I've heard of it.
I think it holds up great. It's a great character, and it's I have thoughts on Columbo, but what was radically different about it compared to other TV shows, and this is my understanding, is you always saw who the murderer was at the beginning of the episode. So it wasn't a suspense as to who done it. It's literally not a who done it. It's how is Columbo going to catch this guy? What did he mess up on? And I was
going to say it's the opposite of a who done it.
Exactly. And that's what Monk was. That's what a lot of not excluded, but that still is a style of it's a different type of mystery, but it's this. So we should get into the technical things about this movie as well, Megan, that are fascinating about the real time. This is, well, let's explain. Megan, would you mind explaining a little bit more about how they made it appear to be in real time? Not to put you on the spot, but
no, it's like, okay. I also want to talk a little bit about I think a classic Hitchcock technique is also showing the camera, or having the camera be the eyes of some of the characters at certain points, which this movie definitely does, to also show past time, if that makes sense. Like they recount, in a great scene, they recount the murder at one point. And all the stuff leading up to it that we didn't see. So that's going on a bit. And we know that everything took place in this room. Obviously, we get the latter end of the murder. Literally, the first scene is the murder, like a finalized murder, but there's things that lead up to that we don't see, obviously. So that also gets recounted in later in the movie, which is really interesting and like a great.
That was a great scene. I forgot about that. That was
great
really
technique.
Cool.
Yeah, but that's right. It all takes place in this apartment throughout the pretty tight party, like maybe 45 or an hour-ish of a party, but
it's a short party. Yeah.
But I think that's also like that's to say that they're also expecting the person who was murdered, David, to show up. And so everyone's saying, where the hell's David, including his fiance? And that, of course, helps lead to the suspense and gearing up as to why people start leaving, people start getting nervous. So that's really great as well. And everybody in this thing is kind of a player of one of their murder game, but Brandon, the leader, like we talked about, really picked these people intentionally for this party, and they're all players in his game, I should actually say, because he is very intentional about who came to this party, and they basically are there to serve a little bit of a cat and mouse game for him in terms of his thought and his adding to his glorious murder that he's trying to pull off, basically. So in that regard, it really kind of works, and he's playing the whole time, basically, and so it's really fun to watch all of these characters. It's fun and suspenseful to watch all these characters scramble around during this thing.
Yeah. And so for the way it's shot, to get this idea of this real-time party, because there's no jumps in time in this movie. It takes place over an 80-minute time period, and there's only 10 shots of this entire movie, and most of them are over 6 minutes long. This is actually, even we talked about long shots quite a bit with Riley in our episode about Stalker. This is more ambitious than that, in that there's only 10 shots in this entire movie. Crap. It's a shorter movie.
I did not even realize that while you're watching it. So
there are some scenes that are over 10 minutes long. Actually, the Wikipedia page is surprisingly thorough in this movie, and it breaks out each shot. So it's immensely impressive to do that. And this is it's on the one hand, it's a one set, but it's also, there's about 6 people in most shots. There's a lot of movement happening. It's a very orchestrated thing, and you have very long dialogue, almost nothing but dialogue for these scenes. It's an amazing technical feat to have a movie that is shot like this. That is,
That's right.
I mean, a lot of the movies that have long shots like this, again, this Chikarask movies have not as much happening, or you have famously scenes like Atonement or Goodfellas, where part of it is the impression is, yeah, there's a big thing happening here. There's crowd scenes, and we love that. But a whole movie that's nothing like this is crazy. And
It's
it's,
true.
I think 1917 is a movie that tried to create the same effect of the illusion that it was all one take. It's not. And in this
Mhm.
movie, the cuts are obviously, if you're looking for them, because it's usually the camera will go to somebody's back and it'll
Sure.
just close on his jacket or something, and then the camera's moving again. But it's a lot of camera movement. This is not just a long shot
Yeah.
because they left the camera like a theater or something.
Yeah.
It's a very involved camera work.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, that's a great point, Seth, because well, this was adapted from a play.
right,
So it was adapted like from a play, and I could totally see that playing out
right.
because of like it's so dialogue heavy and like and stuff like that. But I was imagining it while watching it, and I was like, I'm sure this is like a lot more interesting than the play version, almost the
Yeah, I
film,
think so.
because of
Yeah,
all the camera work going on that you mentioned, which truly is fantastic. And it's like I mentioned before, there's a scene of like recurring or that eye camera shot where
yeah,
they're recurring the past. So like that's only done through pure cinema, like
right.
that
Absolutely.
Hitchcock likes to coin, I guess. So I, and just thinking about it, I was like, this is a lot, like hell of a lot more interesting, I feel like, than I could imagine the play version being. I can see also how that play version would play out with the chest right in the middle. So that's kind of
Right.
exciting too, but it's almost like all they got going for them. And
Yeah,
this one really plays with angles and what the audience can see and are supposed to see,
right. There's the
stuff
great
like
shots where
that.
like there'll be dialogue with like Jimmy Stewart, famous actors who we're going to a movie, we expect to see Jimmy Stewart on screen, but there's like long sequences where the camera is just staying on the coffin. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the people talking are not in focus, they're not even in the shot. You might just see their feet. And it's really cool camera work. And you can see this influencing Martin Scorsese is a huge Hitchcock fan and often has
Mm.
this type of like the cameras leaving and not staying with the people who are talking, and people told him he was nuts for doing that, but he knew what he was talking about. And so did Hitchcock. um, we should get into a little bit of the story here. In the, as we mentioned, this is a gay movie, and this is not just in modern audiences are calling this a gay movie. This is everyone,
Right.
including Hitchcock, knew that they were making a gay movie. So the main
Nice.
summary, we've already done the plot here, but people invite the deceased's loved ones over, but it's a gay couple who do the killing. It's Brandon and
Hmm.
Philip, who are, there's also a classic in this movie. They are prep school boys who are
Yes.
everyone is quite wealthy in this movie. They're all friends from prep school, including the deceased and another gentleman who's invited over. And they attended, or rather they had the Hadelsmaster was a character named Rupert, who is played by
Mhm.
Jimmy Stewart. And in addition to the queer stuff that's going on here, and it's I find this funny. I was watching a behind the scenes thing about this movie, and they wouldn't say homosexual or gay or anything like that on set. They just
Right.
said it. It was referred to as
Oh.
it. And Cary Grant and Montgomery Clift turned down Jimmy Stewart's role. People who were at the time rumored to not be straight and who, my understanding, weren't. I think they're both bisexual. They didn't want to be playing a character that was so clearly associated with gay men. They were
Mhm.
worried about their reputation, so they turned it down. Because it is odd that we get this leader, this mentor for these queer boys is Jimmy Stewart, the Boy Scout, the all-American good guy, who
Yes. Yeah.
does not really have anything effeminate about him. And I think that
Right.
works kind of well because it still leads to the question, like, is he also gay himself? I don't think so. And I
I
like the
know.
implication that it's really just this more isolated thing. But he
Hmm.
kind of popularizes the ideas of mostly Nietzsche here, of the Superman, of like someone who is superior should be able to commit murder
Hmm.
without consequences. And this is an idea that he addresses even at the party, and people say clearly that you must be joking, and he really doubles down. And this movie hit really differently rewatching this, because I think the last 5 or 6 years we've had a lot of, oh, I'm just playing devil's advocate shit happen, especially with Twitter. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you've been at a party where someone is saying something this outlandish and then saying, oh, I'm joking later. But I was at a party 6 years ago, where conversation nearly came to a halt because someone was saying maybe we should just kill homeless people, and then being
Oh.
very brutal about it, then saying, I'm joking afterwards, you guys can't take a joke. And it's never a
Yeah,
comfortable
yeah.
thing. It's always awful. And
Yeah.
it seems like an increasingly common thing with Trumpism and with QAnon and
Yes.
etc. So it was odd to me. It was surprising that Hitchcock is having commentary on this in a movie in 1948
I
about
was
this.
that's
It's just an
that's such a
intellectual
good point.
exercise, because
Uh-huh.
Rupert is the Jimmy Stewart character is very vocally into this, but once he realizes his students have actually done this, he's horrified.
Right,
And
right.
he is the detective, spoiler folks, for a movie that came out this long ago, but he ultimately
Mm-hmm.
does put together clues and find out that they've done it, and arranges for the police to come. But I love this commentary on, no, this is a dumb intellectual exercise. I don't think there's any
Yes.
personally, I don't think there's any value in entertaining this idea. To their credit, they kind of reference everybody. They reference Nietzsche, literally. They reference Crime and
Mm-hmm.
Punishment, which, the whole point of that book is don't do this. And in
Yeah.
Crime and Punishment, he's Reznov, I can't pronounce his name, but the title character is intentionally killing someone who's exploiting people, thinking
Right.
maybe I can get away with this morally, and of course doesn't, is overcome with guilt, and that's the point. So
Right.
it is
Right.
characters misreading this stuff and putting to the test. But it's of note, they're not killing someone who they think is low class. They're not killing someone in poverty, and they're not killing someone they think is exploiting someone. They're killing a peer, or someone who
Yes.
should by all accounts be a peer, but I should say Brandon has convinced Philip that this is someone beneath them who they can get away with. And Brandon is so into this. As soon as it's done, he's very happy. He's loving that. This Philip, you have to imagine this is somewhat of a abusive relationship, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
Philip is shaking immediately, hates that they've done this, can't believe it, can't believe he was talked into this. Yeah, it's a fun dynamic.
And in a way,
It's fun to watch.
Philip is a foil to Brandon's
Yes.
perfect planning execution, and it tries to be a bit of that suspense, or he creates suspense himself, because he's, like Seth said, he's poor Philip is on the brink of like a nervous breakdown basically the whole movie, but especially as it progresses.
Yeah.
And he could very, very quickly tell at any time. So he's a bomb in of himself in this.
Yeah.
Fun bomb to watch and he also is like drinking profuse, like heavily,
Yeah.
as the film goes on and on. So that's a fun element. I love that. Oh, I love that you mentioned that story, Seth, because yes, Brandon is just that idiot like QAnon person nowadays that
Yes.
I can't believe I didn't. And I realized what I thought when I was watching it. My sister's a psych major, so like our favorite game is like diagnose this person in a
this is a right movie for that.
Exactly. And immediately afterwards she's like narcissist, like a quick narcissist diagnosis, so which makes sense.
Yeah.
But also there was an interesting dynamic. He's really wanting the approval and the approval, but like a little after the fact of approval from the Jimmy Stewart's character,
Right.
Is it a professor, or like he was
it's
prep
kind of
school?
like I think they said he was like the housemaster, and
Yeah,
I
that's right.
don't really know what that means. I go to prep school.
I know.
So
yeah.
folks, if we are not as cultured as these highbrow characters
right.
who are murdering people in Manhattan, there's also, this is a very decadent movie. There's champagne being consumed, and there's a lavish dinner platter out, and I just wanted to eat everything. And it's a gorgeous apartment, and like you're never in doubt that these people are rich, and not just richer than me, rich. Like the movie wants you to know that they're rich, and they went to Harvard, and they don't really seem to work. A lot of references to the club, but yeah, I think he was the housemaster. So he was in this mentorship, leadership role for them when they were younger. I think that's maybe teenage years, maybe earlier.
I think so. And certainly Brandon, he was just taken by a lot of his. It's quite a. They're both misanthropes, kind of like they're just against society in a lot of ways, and I thought that was actually
Brandon and Rupert, right?
Yes, Brandon and the prep school master, but it gets revealed later on. Rupert is like, whereas you acted, I would never act on these things. Like, you're insane, basically. But that was a really interesting dynamic, and I thought like ahead of its time too, to have psychological breakdowns where people are saying like, no, you told me this, like this is what I learned from your teachings and your philosophy, so like please accept me. Like that's kind of
Right.
the attitude Brandon gives to him later on, and it's fun to watch him be like, no, like you got that wrong, buddy,
Yeah, and
and
it's
is very
you
upset by this.
so I think there's a lot of stuff that's kind of cliched in gay portrayals. Like
Hmm.
you could say he has daddy issues, basically, in
Yeah.
regards to Rupert. And we talked about this a little bit with our Tokyo Godfathers episode. Like someone could get a little upset with the portrayals of like there's gay characters and they're murderers
Of
and they're
course.
sloppy, but I still stand by, like, I like it's not that important to the plot that they're gay, which is why I like that the
That's right.
movie makes it very clear that they are, even by
That's right.
1948 standards. Like they could just be guys who, it doesn't have to be Brandon and Philip's apartment. Philip's the guy who's cracking. Like it could be Brandon's and Philip came over and helped him do this. But it's
I
very
like
clear
it.
that they live together, and they have lived together for a long time, and they are going to continue living together.
Right.
So there is no doubt about what's going on in this arrangement. And so I like that they happen to be gay and they also are murderers. And
Yeah.
they feel like fully fleshed characters to me. Philip is
Mhm.
it's not that he was manipulated because he's gay. He was manipulated
It's
because he was
true.
manipulated by Brandon. And
It's quite subtle. Like
yeah, I think so.
you may argue nowadays that it would be a little more characterized almost if they
Yeah.
were, and it's not. Like I did enjoy that as well, and you're right, Seth, it just doesn't it's not that it doesn't contribute to the plot line, but it's not a factor as to why they are these murderous people. It's
Yeah.
just it's just an element of their lives. So
Right.
interesting choice, and I did like that about it too. I'm
Yeah,
glad
because
you mentioned it.
there was still censorship issues, so they wanted to make
uh
it clear that it was gay, but also not too clear.
I
So
see.
this is actually kind of fun. So this is based off a real case that happened in Chicago in,
Mm.
I think, the 20s, and then it was a play in England, and an English man made the movie in America. So this story
Okay.
crossed the Atlantics a few times, but
Wow.
when they were adapting the play, there was more English language. There was a lot of "my dear boy," and they just had to cross off all the more casually English talk because censors told them that's going to sound too gay. It was just
Yeah.
that was just rich English people talking as rich English people.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, there was changes made to make it appeal to a wider audience, but people knew. So it was
Yeah,
and stuff like that from like not even that long ago was fascinating to me, of the balancing act of like, this is subtext that is
right.
pretty clear, but also can't be any clearer than this.
Hmm. The it can't be said words.
Yeah, exactly. Adding to the bizarre drama of this, we mentioned Brandon invites. Well, it's actually a surprise that he invites Rupert. Philip is horrified that he invites Rupert
Yeah.
because like Rupert is smart, and as soon as Rupert is in the room, Brandon is stammering around him, which is complete. It's like this is seeing his mentor crush again, who he really wants to prove himself to. And you can tell Brandon kind of wants to be found out by Rupert. He even mentions at some point he considered inviting him in on this. He wants it to be
Yes.
known that I did what you couldn't, but and I think Philip is appropriately scared of that. Like, you want to show off. Also, he'll figure it out. So
Yeah.
you have that. But just in more fun, twisted stuff, Brandon also invites the fiance of the deceased and an ex-boyfriend and pretends that he doesn't realize they dated, and is just playing weird fucking mind games with them, joking about like, well, you two are getting back together. And even though it by the end of the party seems like the fiance, like it's assumed that an accident or something happened, they don't find him. Everyone leaves and Rupert comes back because he's figured it out. He confronts them. But I like this other element that kind of adds to the what is mostly a drawing room scene movie, from her in the background. You do also have additional domestic high class drama of jilted lovers.
Yeah. Why'd you invite my ex?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
fun. It's just riddled with bitchy dialogue throughout. Just a older, completely pleasant woman comes in at some point who's like the sister of the mother, and I think she would be fun at a party, but everyone, especially Rupert and Brandon, are just giving her such shit. And she just at some point says, "Oh, I read a lot in my younger days." She's like, "Oh, we all did crazy things in our youth." And
just roasting her.
Just roasting her constantly. And she doesn't seem unaware of it. And poor, is it Janet? Is that the fiance?
forgetting her
She's a
name.
great. She only did 3 movies. That actress was fantastic. I thought
She
I would have liked to
was.
see
I
her in more
thought so too.
things.
She's
But yeah,
stunning.
she looks
Also.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
but is just having. She is maybe having the worst night of my fiance's not here, and also Brandon is her ex. So
Mm-hmm.
I should note I think there's a possible reading that I personally ascribe to that Brandon is at least bisexual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just which I mentioned, all because bisexuals are usually erased.
Mm.
But yeah, it's her ex-boyfriend invited her over to make her force her to spend time for other ex-boyfriend, and
Mm-hmm.
the fiance rather is missing. So just an all-around awful night for her.
Yes, it's true. The poor astrologist woman. She was also like
That's right. She was an astrologist. Yeah.
self-claimed astrologist.
Yeah.
Didn't notice the murder happening, but she added to it a little bit by looking at who's it,
Philip.
Tim and Phillips,
Yeah.
Philip's hands, saying these are. She was a bit of a palm reader, I guess, and she said like your hands are destined for greatness, and
Yes.
sending him into
You'll be
another
famous for these
existential
hands. That's
spiral.
what, yeah.
Yes, that's
yes.
right. That's right.
Because Philip is a piano player who has a concert coming up, and yeah, there's a lot of. That's a very Hitchcock touch to have this ghoulish joke of someone saying something commenting on a murder without the character realizing they're commenting on the murder. You know?
I see. Well, that was done a lot. That was really fun. That was
which
fun.
I find funny. You know,
I did too. Yeah, a lot of like knock 'em dead jokes and
yes,
and
yes,
you're gonna kill it tonight kind of thing. That was fun.
Yeah, which is, I mean, to me, this is a very fun movie to watch because it is just darkly comic throughout. I can fully understand and would not argue with anybody who finds this just to be in bad taste. But
sure, I liked it.
Yeah, I greatly enjoy it. I was surprised Hitchcock thought this was a failure.
Really?
He thought that this was maybe just him experimenting too much and that maybe the studio should have reeled him in, and was glad that it got a limited release. But I think he's wrong. I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, since we're talking, I mean, it may be on the brink of like dark comedy, which I don't know how popular that was at the time, but certainly I found it comedic. Like we were kind of like giggling along as this murder took place, and maybe that was taboo at the time or a little too much, if it is, but maybe that's where he's coming from. But like I said, I mean, I think for modern audiences, they're actually going to kind of get a kick out of this. And certainly things have been way more twisted than this. So this is not like, I think it is a little like cheeky, I guess is the best way I could say it. But it's not, there's been way more like sick, twisted, dark comedies than this. So I'm like, I did enjoy it. And I thought it was very, cheeky, like I said, or just like theatrical. Also, there were some kind of like thematic elements in it, but that's funny that he didn't quite see it that way.
I think you're right, because he did say in interviews that he did regret not experimenting more, and because he was like, if someone's paying to see the Hitchcock movie, it better be a thriller, you know. And he tried a couple times in his career to do a more straight comedy, and they didn't really work. But I think, you know, I didn't think of it until you said it, but you're probably right. If someone was making this movie now, like for the first time, it probably would be made as a more intentionally directly funny movie. You know, it probably would be more of like marketed as like this new dark comedy. Like I didn't see it, but there's that movie a couple years ago, Game Night, that is like people are invited to a murder mystery, then turns out somebody's actually murdered. You know, like we're more used to like Clue, and we're more expecting and indulgent of movies like that. Like I love a dark comedy, and it should be twisted.
Yeah, so, I'm thinking of like Jordan Peele, even,
or something
like where it's really, really blended. Like this was very like subtly, it was very much more like suspense than a comedy, I would say. But to have those like little comedic elements, and then the way that we're reacting to it, we're like, yeah, it was like fun, like it was a fun like murder, and it was like there's just no other way to say it for me. But if they were to make it today, I think the lines would get blurred even more, and like there would be more thematic elements. So I think that maybe that's what Hitchcock was alluding to in his early career. But
I think so.
It was certainly effective for me. Like I think the best way to describe the movie was just like it was such a nice, like tight little movie that the pacing also, I wanted to say, was like really nice. There was not a slow moment for me. I think starting off with the murder is like quite the there's a bit of a shock there kind of, and then we're kind of dissipate throughout the whole thing, but we know that it's happening. So that was
Yeah.
very, very fun to watch, and I think really well done
I,
personally.
I agree. I thought this was in the making of documentary I watched. The screenwriter really argued with Hitchcock about this.
Oh.
He thought that the audience shouldn't know whether or not they actually did the crime, and it should be more alluded to, and that would
Oh.
be the twist. It's like, which is it's the idea of telling Hitchcock he's wrong about suspense is really funny to me.
Yeah.
But I think that would have defeated the whole, like, that's a different movie where it's like you don't know if the crimes
Exactly.
actually happened, but I don't think it'd be nearly as good
Yeah.
as knowing, and then the audience was forced to hang out at this awkward party, which was
Yeah.
planned intentionally to be the most awkward party possible. um,
Yes. Yeah.
and
It would kind
I
of,
enjoy the cattiness of Brandon, and just like, how do I make this even
yeah.
weirder?
Exactly. I was gonna say it would color the characters way more different if we didn't know that Brandon had done this, because then
Right.
you're just like, well, what is this guy doing? Like, why is he so weird?
Yeah.
And then what the hell's wrong with Philip? Who's Philip was so funny to me. I don't know. We were just cracking up at how like he really derailed, and that
Oh
was a
yeah.
great
Well, he's
foil
just
to
yelling
Brandon.
at Jimmy Stewart by the end of it, like, he
Yeah,
said he could have a drink.
we were
Like,
cracking up at that.
I really enjoyed the increasing drunk that I felt pretty accurate for like getting wasted over 80 minutes, and he's just
Yeah,
swaying, cannot look at anybody in the eye by the end of the movie.
just staring at him while he drinks his drink in the chair. Oh,
I
so
love that scene.
good.
Yeah.
I mean, that was obviously intentionally comedic, so I
Right.
loved little bits like that. Like that was really well done, I thought.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine it any other way. And then, so I don't think that making it a if they did it or not would be effective in the way that they wanted. I think it was really
Yeah.
important to see that they did this.
Yeah. Every now and then they remake a Hitchcock, and it always seems to be a mistake. Like Disturbia was a remake of Rear Window.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, in general, I'm not too precious about remakes. Like the version everybody knows of the Maltese Falcon, the version with Humphrey Bogart, was like the third version of that movie.
Oh my
And
God.
I don't, and like we've talked about Little Women, I think, in other episodes. Like I'm pretty happy to watch an adaptation of a good book again, a modern one. But it feels foolish to remake a Hitchcock movie, especially when there's a track record of it not going well.
Yeah, I think it would just be so you're a slave a bit to the original for Hitchcock, especially because of how and I think it's just a testament to like how iconic, not, I mean, like we said, like people don't really know this movie, but watching it I was like, oh, I know that this is Hitchcock because of like its camera work and the way that it kind of unfolds. So I think that that's kind of hard to try and make your own, I guess. I just can't. It's a feat that I wouldn't want to take as a filmmaker, like, if I were to do it. So I'm just like, I don't know. Like,
oh, absolutely.
It'd be fun, but it'd be hard. It'd be hard.
Yeah. Well, I think actually, like on a weird one was Gus Van Sant did a remake of Psycho with Vince Vaughn and Viggo Mortensen. I think the idea was to try and do a shot for shot remake just to as an experiment to see what would happen. It's like the cast isn't bad, but that why Psycho's a great movie. So I don't think that performed well critically or commercially.
Sure. Doing a big Hitchcock kind of is like odd. I don't know.
If you're like do one of his ones from the 20s that people haven't seen, that's silent,
if
you're
it'd be kind of cool.
Well, Hitchcock remade his own movies a couple times. The Man Who Knew Too Much was a movie he did in the 30s, then again in the 50s with Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's not a lot of people have done that, but he's done it.
Whoa, okay, that's cool. That's good.
On the note of being influenced by Hitchcock, I think we're going to transition probably to our suggestions.
For sure. If you could go first, Seth, I would love to hear your take.
Sure. So I think we maybe have already said this or a version of it, but like it's very possible, I think, for a director to be influenced by Hitchcock without even realizing it. But I'm going to talk about a couple of movies that I think are more direct. And on the note of being influenced by Rope specifically, with this really stylistically and like on a technical level ambitious movie, which I think a lot of people could watch this and not realize that the camera hasn't cut in 10 minutes. You're just watching people talking. But a movie that did this more extreme is Russian Ark, and this is an entire movie in one shot. It's I find it really great. It is kind of a Russian history in 90 minutes, and it's spirits wandering through a museum. But it's still like there's big set pieces in this. It's a very experimental art house movie, but like there's
Sure.
major extras in this movie, huge production scenes that happen. It's much more ambitious in scale, and
Hmm.
it's the entire runtime is one shot. So I think it took them 20 takes,
I see.
but
Dang. Oh
so
my God.
that's one I have to look at Russian Ark. And then maybe a more popular movie I'm gonna go with is Fargo,
Ah, okay.
the Coen Brothers movie, because Fargo to me is the best crime gone as wrong as possible movie. And Hitchcock, not that he invented that, but that movie certainly borrows a lot of this crime getting increasingly out of hand. So Fargo is probably the best crime, in my opinion, my favorite and the best example of crime goes increasingly wrong movie, which is often the case. It's people getting caught up in things much bigger than they realize. This is North by Northwest. This is Psycho. That begins with a person committing a crime, and just getting caught up in something so much stranger than they expected. And a technique that the Coen brothers employed often, and I hope they make another movie together again, is
Hmm.
something that Hitchcock always did of really, for lack of a better word, he storyboarded the hell out of everything. Like he always knew what
Ah,
a movie was going to look like in the shooting. There was very little editing, even on his other movies that weren't in crazy long shots, just because he knew exactly where the camera's going to be, where the actors are going to be. He knew what the movie looked like in his head. There was not a lot of room for improvisation or experimentation. And it was
sure.
a very efficient way of shooting. And the Coen brothers are known for this as well. Like there's no doubt in their mind of how the shot's going to go.
Mm.
Everyone has a specific place they're supposed to be. And I think tonally their movies are often different, other than Dark Humor, Aladdin, Coen brothers movies. And it's maybe not as obvious of a homage as like Blue Velvet is to Vertigo and Rear or something, but I
Hmm.
think this is a
Hmm.
movie that just really employs this technique appropriately. It just kind of goes to show how widely, what a range of
Yeah.
filmmakers and film styles Hitchcock has influenced.
Yeah, it's true. Like I said, it's crazy that even having known so little about Hitchcock, it's so easily identifiable. I'm sure that like even if you're like an American, I think it's been like in our psyche, I guess, for just so long that we
Right.
kind of we may internalize these things more than we even realize, and it's just a part of your filmic repertoire, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's certainly that's the case for me. But cool, very good pick, Seth. um yeah, I that's really interesting. So I've just been like thinking about it now, and researching it before we started to pick something. But
Right.
and because there's so many, like I said, that
Yeah.
could films that could be influenced by Hitchcock, and it's going to continue to happen, of course. And in kind of like a little bit of an offbeat one, I was thinking of a movie that like I recently saw, a remake of a old horror classic, actually, The Invisible Man, which I don't know
Oh
if you saw
yeah.
that remake, Seth,
I,
but
I
with
I really
Elizabeth
want to.
Moss.
Yeah.
I would say that it's a little bit sci-fi element, like there. So in the remake, I don't want to give like too much away, but obviously a woman is kind of accused of murdering her partner in a way, and then she feels haunted by some kind of ghost, but it gets revealed later on that he has found a way to become invisible and like stalk this woman and continue. It was actually an abusive relationship, and he kind of
Mm,
continues to abuse her.
mm.
So I love that our discussions about suspense, and I do think that like Hitchcock influenced that so much. And I just thought, like, what more suspense is there than like there's a literal like invisible man in your place, and kind of like gaslighting as well. Like people are like, it's not a ghost. Like, what are you talking about? And
Right.
she's like, no, like things are happening to me. Like I like that there's an element of uh that added, it was a little bit of sci-fi, like I said, but it's an added element of he's actually there. Like this isn't a paranormal
Yeah.
story, and how do you convince people to of something that's actually happening? So that kind of felt a little Hitchcockian to me, if
Oh,
you will. And
absolutely. I think
yeah.
not to cut you off. Yeah, a lot
Oh
of
please.
his movies have like a great old one. Old
Hmm.
Hitchcock is The Lady Vanishes,
I
which
see. Hmm.
is main premise is a woman talks to an older woman on the train, and she steps away for a moment, and she's like, "Oh, has anyone seen that?" And no one else on the train acknowledges that this woman existed.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it
So
really seems like it's a ghost or something. And but yeah, these movies, he has a few movies like this where it really seems like there's strongly hinting or gonna the ending's gonna be a supernatural thing is happening, and it's not.
Yes, I think there's kind of like in others I've seen also the terror, I guess, or a feeling of being alone in your
Right.
thoughts is a theme that comes up for him as well a lot.
Yeah.
I'm the Birds is pretty like it happens to her
Mm.
in solitary a lot of the times,
Right. Right.
and people are just like no, like I don't think that's happening. So,
Mhm.
or I guess like gaslighting is the best way to say that, or just discrediting, I guess, is
Yeah.
he likes to do that a lot. So that kind of reminded me of the really great I thought remake of The Invisible Man, which is a 1933. The original version was 1933. So if anybody can see that, both, I haven't seen the original unfortunately, and then
Yeah.
the remake made me want to watch the original to kind of see how they get that going, and I would love to see that aspect of it. I think it's fun, and they're able to do more technological things obviously with this remake that I'm sure they weren't able to do in the 1933 version. So excited to see
Yeah.
both, but the remake was actually pretty good, so I would check that out if you can.
I think it's a wildly different story from my understanding. Like I think
Okay.
the hero in the original, or the protagonist, is the man himself who's turned himself invisible.
I see.
And there's no I believe he's a petty criminal or something who accidentally stumbles into like a factory or something, but it's a H.G. Wells story, I believe. But yeah, I also haven't seen it. I just like the famous image is that Claude Rains had himself wrapped up like a mummy, and then has the artist has like the hat and glasses on, and there's no face. You know,
which funnily enough, I almost thought that image was a Hitchcock movie or something like that. It's not.
Well, I mean, that's the thing to note too, is like he was influencing people right away. You mentioned Gaslight, the movie Gaslight, which comes from the 40s. And that was largely influenced by Hitchcock. So he was influencing people very quickly in his day. But yeah, you'll see once you've seen a Hitchcock movie, you'll realize how many tricks are much older than you thought they were, I think, especially in the suspense or horror genre. I think a misunderstanding people have of this movie is that there's always a twist. There's not always a twist. There's usually is one. But like M. Night Shyamalan, when he came out, there's all these articles hailing him as the new Hitchcock, and he always has a cameo in his movies and really tried to be that, but for someone who studied it so much, didn't seem to understand how it worked. You know, especially like old, as we've mentioned before.
Oh yes, I've heard that M. Night Shyamalan, he was trying to be a Spielberg almost. I've heard like many things, obviously, but he was trying to be a jack of all trade. Like he was trying. I think that it would have been cool for him to actually stay in that lane, M. Night, because some of his original stuff was pretty like
I think Unbreakable holds up really well.
Pretty good, of course. And so I think that he suffered a little bit trying to be a jack of all trades, but I digress. We'll talk about M. Night Shyamalan a little later. I'm sure.
A career retrospect or something. But
he deserves it.
On the note of people maybe not pulling off as well, like Francois Truffaut, who did a several years long interview with Hitchcock on every film Hitchcock ever made, which is a great book, and was himself deeply influenced by Hitchcock in his movies. The movies in which he was most trying to emulate Hitchcock are considered his worst. So, and Truffaut was a great filmmaker. He was just better at doing lighter comedies than when he tried to do a suspense movie, unfortunately. And so you could be a very competent director and still not quite pull this off. It's fortunately not a thing everybody can do. So
I agree. Like I think the movie always just reminded me that like simplistic suspense was so well done. The pacing was good, and I'm talking about Rope now, like to bring it back to the movie. Like I just thought that it was just nice and like tight and very well thought out. I also loved these old movies tend to be a little like chatty, like dialogue heavy. It's all like talk, but nothing in this movie I felt like was fluff. Like even even if they're talking in the background, like obviously like that's meant for an effect of they're doing something else that the camera focuses on. But every piece of dialogue, every like movement is intentional in this, and that's kind of like hard to do. I can't believe that it was, you said like 10 shots.
Only 10 shots for the whole movie.
That is so insane. And this is free on Peacock right now, folks. That's how I watched it, which is nice. But us freebies, we get those pesky ads that I think that's what I didn't realize that it was so few shots because of those. So So that's just keep that in mind as if you're watching it via Peacock. It wasn't too bad. Also, I will say like props to Peacock for not being like so freaking annoying about ads.
Yeah, I was about to watch on Peacock. I remember I had it on DVD because I was thinking about that. I don't want to have
That's smart.
on the note of 10 shots, we think we've said this before in another episode, but for reference, folks, the average movie has over 1,000 shots. So this is crazy to have a fraction of that.
Yeah.
It's also, I on the note of the humor, and it's also a meta movie because I think I mentioned Cary Grant was turned down the role. At one point, I forgot her name, the older woman is talking about seeing a movie recently with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman. And it's like, was that something or just plain something? It's plain something. They probably talking about Notorious, which is a movie Hitchcock did with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman like recently.
That's always fun.
Calling out somebody who turned down the role, but also referencing his own movie. And he was a popular enough figure that joke would not have been lost on the audience, you know. So I think that's going to wrap up this episode for us today, folks. Stay tuned for more. If you could, please follow us and give us that 5-star.
Take care.
Take care.